Before we begin, have you ever had a moment where a mistake turned out to be exactly what you needed? Share your experience in the comments below after listening to this intriguing story. Tonight's blind date was just another calculated move. Jennifer Walsh, daughter of a prominent federal judge, Harvard law graduate, perfectly suitable for a man of his stature. His assistant had arranged it through mutual connections, a merger of compatible backgrounds and ambitions rather than anything as unpredictable as genuine attraction. Mr. Blackwell. The maitre d' approached with practiced deference. Your table is ready, sir. Shall we seat you, or would you prefer to wait for your guest? Marcus glanced at his watch again. 7:47 p.m. Jennifer was 17 minutes late, not fashionably late, simply inconsiderate. He'd built his empire on punctuality and precision. Lateness was a character flaw he found difficult to overlook. I'll wait a few more minutes, he replied, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Across the restaurant's marble foyer, the revolving door spun again, admitting a gust of Seattle's evening drizzle along with a figure that made Marcus pause mid-thought. She wasn't Jennifer Walsh. He'd seen enough photos to recognize his intended date immediately. This woman was smaller, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail rather than an elaborate updo, wearing a modest blue dress that had clearly seen better days but was impeccably clean and pressed. What struck him wasn't her appearance, though there was something undeniably lovely about her natural understated beauty, but the way she moved. She paused just inside the entrance, her shoulders straightening as she took in the restaurant's opulence with wide eyes that held no envy, only quiet appreciation. Her hand moved instinctively to smooth her dress, a gesture so unconsciously graceful it made something tighten unexpectedly in Marcus's chest. She approached the hostess stand with measured steps, clearly out of her element but refusing to be intimidated. Marcus found himself listening despite his better judgment. I'm here about the job posting. Her voice was warm honey with the faintest tremor of nervousness. For the catering assistant position? I called earlier, and someone said to come in tonight to speak with the manager. The hostess, Clarissa, whose name Marcus knew because he dined here frequently, looked the woman up and down with barely concealed disdain. I think there's been some confusion, miss. We don't typically conduct interviews during dinner service, and certainly not with someone dressed. She paused, her silence more cutting than words. Marcus watched the woman's chin lift fractionally, dignity settling over her like armor despite the obvious slight. I apologize for any confusion. The person I spoke with specifically said to come at 8 o'clock. I can wait until you're available, or come back at a more convenient time. That won't be necessary, Clarissa replied coolly. Perhaps you should try the establishments more suited to your background. Good evening. The dismissal was brutal in its politeness. Marcus had witnessed countless business negotiations where less obvious cruelty had devastated grown men, yet this woman simply nodded gracefully. Of course. Thank you for your time. She turned to leave, her composure intact despite the humiliation. It was then that Marcus noticed what Clarissa had missed. A small boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, sitting quietly on a bench near the entrance. He'd been reading a worn paperback book, clearly instructed to stay put and not cause trouble. When the woman approached him, his face lit up with such pure adoration it was almost painful to witness. How did it go, Mama? He whispered, closing his book carefully and tucking it into a backpack that had been repaired with tape in several places. Not tonight, sweetie, she replied, her voice steady despite what must have been crushing disappointment. But that just means something better is waiting for us. Marcus watched her smooth the boy's hair with infinite tenderness, saw the way she straightened his jacket, a gesture of love so automatic it spoke of years of such moments. The child leaned into her touch trustingly, and she pressed a soft kiss to his forehead. Are you hungry? She asked, pulling a small granola bar from her purse. I saved this from lunch. The boy shook his head quickly. I'm okay, Mama. We can eat when we get home. Marcus's throat tightened. He recognized the careful dance, a mother trying to provide, a child trying not to burden. His own childhood had been one of abundance, but he remembered his grandmother's stories of harder times, the quiet sacrifices love demanded. Mr. Blackwell? Clarissa had approached while he was distracted. I'm terribly sorry, but I have Jennifer Walsh on the line. She's running quite late due to a client emergency and wondered if you might reschedule. Perfect. Another perfectly planned evening disrupted by other people's lack of consideration. Marcus was about to respond when he heard the woman's voice again, now tinged with frustration. Excuse me, she was saying to the parking attendant. I gave you my keys 20 minutes ago. Where's my car? The attendant, a teenager with an attitude problem Marcus had noticed before, barely looked up from his phone. Silver Honda, right? Yeah, I moved it to the overflow lot down the street. $5 fee. $5? You didn't mention any fee when I handed you the keys. New policy. The kid shrugged with infuriating indifference. Pay up or walk. Marcus saw her shoulders tense, watched her glance at her son who was pretending to read but obviously listening to every word. $5. Probably the difference between dinner tomorrow or going hungry. That's when everything changed. What would you do if you witnessed someone being treated unfairly? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your response might surprise you. The woman, Marcus still didn't know her name, reached into her worn purse with the careful precision of someone counting every dollar. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, and Marcus saw her close her eyes for just a moment, as if steeling herself for what that money represented. Here, she said quietly, handing over the bill. The parking attendant snatched it without acknowledgement, tossing her keys onto the counter with deliberate carelessness. They hit the marble surface and skittered toward the edge. Without thinking, Marcus stepped forward and caught them before they could fall. Excuse me, he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had silenced countless boardrooms. The parking attendant looked up, suddenly recognizing him. Marcus's face had been on the cover of Forbes 3 months ago. Mr. Blackwell. I didn't see you there, sir. Is everything all right? Marcus held the woman's keys for a moment longer than necessary, noting how her hand brushed his when he placed them in her palm. Her skin was soft despite the calluses he could feel, hands that worked hard but were gentle with her son. There seems to be some confusion about fees that weren't disclosed up front, Marcus said evenly. I assume that's an oversight that will be corrected immediately? The attendant's face went pale. Of course, sir. Absolutely. Here's your refund, miss. He practically threw the $5 back at her. The woman stared at the returned money, then at Marcus, her dark eyes wide with surprise and something else, suspicion maybe, or simply the wariness of someone not accustomed to unexpected kindness from strangers. Thank you, she said softly, but that wasn't necessary. Actually, it was. Marcus found himself studying her face, noting the exhaustion she was trying to hide, the way her dress had been altered to fit better, skilled handiwork that spoke of necessity making do. I'm Marcus Blackwell. Elena Rodriguez, she replied after a moment's hesitation. And this is my son, Danny. The boy had approached quietly, staying close to his mother's side but regarding Marcus with frank curiosity rather than fear. His book, Marcus could see now, was a worn copy of Island of the Blue Dolphins, advanced reading for his age. Good book, Marcus observed. Have you gotten to the part where Karana makes fire yet? Danny's face lit up. Yes. She used the sticks and the tinder, and it took her so long but she didn't give up. Mama says that's the most important part, not giving up even when things are really hard. Elena's cheeks flushed slightly. Danny reads above his grade level. His teacher says he could skip ahead, but... She trailed off, and Marcus heard the unfinished sentence, but we can't afford the programs that would challenge him. Intelligence like that shouldn't be wasted, Marcus said, meaning it. There are scholarship programs. We don't need charity, Elena interrupted, her voice polite but firm. The dignity he'd noticed earlier had steel beneath it. Thank you for your help with the parking situation, But we should go. Danny has school tomorrow. She turned to leave, but Marcus couldn't let her disappear into the Seattle night. There was something about her, about both of them, that made his carefully ordered world feel suddenly insufficient. "Wait," he called, then immediately felt foolish. He was a man who commanded million-dollar deals with confidence, yet he was stumbling over words with a woman he'd known for 5 minutes. "I was supposed to meet someone for dinner, but she canceled. Would you and Danny like to join me? I hate eating alone, and I've already reserved the table." Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Blackwell, I appreciate your kindness, but we're not," she struggled for words that wouldn't offend him while maintaining her boundaries. "I'm not looking for anything," Marcus said quickly, understanding her concern. "Just dinner. 2 people sharing a meal and conversation. Nothing more complicated than that." Danny tugged on his mother's hand. "Mama," he whispered loudly, "I'm really hungry. And he seems nice." Elena looked down at her son, and Marcus saw the moment her resolve wavered. The granola bar in her purse was probably all she had to offer him tonight, and pride was a luxury she couldn't afford when it came to her child's well-being. "One condition," she said finally. "We split the check. I won't be anyone's charity case." Marcus wanted to argue. The cost of dinner at the Crystal Room was probably more than she made in a week, but he recognized the importance of her dignity. "Of course," he lied smoothly. "Though I should warn you, I was planning to order the most expensive item on the menu." Despite herself, Elena smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "Then I guess I'll have to settle for a salad." "Actually," Danny piped up with the brutal honesty of childhood, "Mama's a really good cook. Better than restaurants, probably. She makes this chicken thing with rice that's amazing, even when we only have a little bit of chicken." "Danny," Elena warned softly, but Marcus was enchanted by the boy's openness. "I'd love to try it sometime," he said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. As Clarissa led them to Marcus's usual table, her attitude toward Elena having shifted dramatically upon seeing her with Seattle's most eligible bachelor, Marcus found himself genuinely curious about these people who had stumbled into his evening. Elena's hand rested protectively on Danny's shoulder as they walked, and Marcus noticed how she took in the restaurant's details not with envy but with appreciation, as if she were storing up beauty to remember later. "This is incredible," she murmured as they were seated at Marcus's preferred table overlooking the city lights. "Danny, look at that view." The boy pressed his nose to the window, eyes wide with wonder. "You can see everything from up here." "Mama, look how small the cars look." Marcus watched Elena watching her son, saw the love and slight sadness in her expression. She was giving him this moment of wonder while probably calculating how much this meal would cost her, how many shifts she'd need to pick up to afford her half of the bill. That's when Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Over appetizers, Elena had indeed ordered only a small salad while Danny devoured bread rolls with the enthusiasm of genuine hunger. Marcus learned that his assumptions had been both right and devastatingly wrong. Elena worked 3 jobs: morning shifts at a medical office doing filing and insurance verification, afternoon house cleaning for a small agency, and weekend catering when she could get it. Danny was in 3rd grade at a public school where he was indeed academically advanced, but stuck in classes that couldn't challenge him. They lived in a small apartment in Ballard, took the bus everywhere, and managed their lives with a precision that would have impressed Marcus's CFO. "How do you do it?" he asked, genuinely curious. 3 jobs and raising a son. When do you sleep?" Elena's laugh was tired but genuine. "Sleep is overrated. Besides, Danny's worth it. He's going to have opportunities one never had. That's non-negotiable." "What about his father?" Marcus asked, then immediately regretted the question when he saw Elena's face close off. "Not in the picture," she said simply. "His choice." Danny looked up from his chicken fingers. Marcus had quietly upgraded their order when Elena wasn't looking, claiming the kitchen had made an error. "My dad lives in California now," he said matter-of-factly. "He has a new family." But that's okay because Mama and I are a team, right, Mama? Right, Elena agreed softly, ruffling his hair. The best team. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He'd grown up with every advantage, two parents who'd provided everything except emotional presence, boarding schools that had given him excellence but not warmth. This boy had so much less materially, but seemed infinitely richer in the things that actually mattered. What about you? Elena asked, clearly trying to shift the conversation away from her circumstances. No family waiting for you at home? Marcus hesitated. The truth was complicated. His parents lived in retirement in Palm Beach, speaking to him only when they needed something. His relationships were carefully managed affairs that never progressed past mutual convenience. He'd convinced himself he preferred it that way. No, he said simply. Just me. That must get lonely, Danny observed with the startling insight children sometimes possessed. Danny, Elena warned gently, but Marcus found he wanted to answer. Sometimes, he admitted. I keep pretty busy though. What kind of work do you do? Elena asked. Besides rescuing strangers from parking attendants? Marcus smiled at that. I run a technology company. We develop software systems for businesses, streamlining operations, improving efficiency, that sort of thing. He was deliberately downplaying it, but Elena wasn't fooled. Blackwell Technologies, she said quietly. I've heard of it. You're not just successful, you're Seattle royalty. There was something in her tone that made Marcus uncomfortable, not accusation exactly, but a recognition of the gulf between their worlds. Success is relative, he said carefully. Not when you're struggling to pay rent, Elena replied, but without bitterness. I'm not judging you for having money, Mr. Blackwell. I'm just wondering why you're having dinner with us. It was a fair question, and Marcus found he didn't have a good answer. Why had he inserted himself into their evening? Why did he care what happened to them? He dealt with charitable causes through his foundation, wrote checks, attended galas, kept a careful distance from the actual human impact of poverty. But watching Elena count out exact change for the parking fee, seeing the careful way she rationed Danny's portions while ensuring he had enough, it had touched something in Marcus that he'd thought was safely buried. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe because you treated that hostess with grace even though she was horrible to you. Maybe because your son reads advanced books and talks about not giving up. Maybe because you're raising him to be a good person despite everything being stacked against you. Elena's eyes softened slightly, but she shook her head. You don't know anything about me, Mr. Blackwell. This could all be an act. Could be, Marcus agreed. But it's not. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the restaurant's entrance. A woman in an expensive suit was speaking loudly to Clarissa, her voice carrying across the dining room. I specifically said I needed a table tonight. Do you understand who I am? My father is Judge Walsh, and I will not be treated like some common. Marcus groaned internally. Jennifer Walsh, his cancelled blind date, had apparently decided to show up after all. Elena followed his gaze and immediately understood. That's her, isn't it? The woman you were supposed to meet. Unfortunately, yes. Jennifer had spotted him now and was making her way across the restaurant, her expression shifting from entitled anger to calculated charm as she approached their table. Her gaze swept over Elena and Danny with barely concealed disdain before settling on Marcus. Marcus, darling. I'm so sorry I'm late. The Peterson case ran longer than expected, but you know how it is with high-profile clients. She leaned down to air-kiss his cheek, positioning herself deliberately to exclude Elena and Danny from the conversation. I hope you haven't been waiting long. Actually, Marcus said, standing but making no move to invite Jennifer to join them, I'm having dinner with Elena and Danny Rodriguez. Elena, Danny, this is Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer's smile became brittle as she was forced to acknowledge them. How lovely. And what do you do, Elena? The question was posed with a kind of false sweetness that barely concealed its intent to establish hierarchy. Marcus tensed, ready to intervene, but Elena simply smiled. "I work in healthcare administration," she said smoothly. Technically true, though it encompassed only one of her 3 jobs. "And you?" "Corporate law. Mergers and acquisitions, primarily." Jennifer's attention was already returning to Marcus. "Perhaps we could get a table for 2? I have so much to tell you about the Peterson case." "Actually, we were just finishing dessert," Marcus lied smoothly. "Perhaps another time." Jennifer's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. She was used to being the most important person in any room, accustomed to having men rearrange their schedules around her availability. Being dismissed for a clearly working-class woman and her child was an insult she wouldn't soon forget. "Of course," she said coolly. "Elena, it was so nice to meet you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening." The pause before evening made it clear she was thinking of other words. After Jennifer left, the table fell quiet. Danny had picked up on the adult tension, even if he didn't fully understand it, and Elena's walls were clearly rebuilding themselves. "I should get Danny home," she said quietly. "School tomorrow." "Elena. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Blackwell. It was generous of you." She was already reaching for her purse, preparing to leave money on the table despite his earlier assurance that they'd split the check. Marcus realized he was losing her, losing them both, and the thought created an unexpected panic in his chest. "Wait. Please. Have you ever had someone judge you based on assumptions? How did it make you feel? Share your thoughts below. Everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are." Elena paused, her hand still resting on her purse, but she didn't sit back down. The encounter with Jennifer had reminded them both, of the vast social chasm that separated their worlds. Marcus could see her retreat happening in real time, watch her rebuild the protective barriers he'd somehow managed to slip past during dinner. "Elena, please don't let her." Marcus searched for the right words, conscious that Danny was listening to every word. "Don't let someone else's rudeness ruin what's been a really wonderful evening." "It hasn't ruined anything," Elena replied carefully. "It just reminded me of reality. Thank you for dinner, but we should go." She stood, gathering Danny's book and helping him into his jacket with practiced efficiency. Marcus felt something close to desperation rising in his chest, a completely foreign emotion for a man who'd built his life on control and careful planning. "Danny," Marcus said suddenly, addressing the boy directly, "did you know that my company has a mentorship program for kids who love reading and science?" Elena's movements stilled. Danny's eyes widened with interest. "What kind of mentorship program?" Danny asked, ignoring his mother's warning look. "We partner with schools to provide advanced learning opportunities for students who are ready for bigger challenges. Computer programming, robotics, creative writing workshops. And there are scholarships for summer programs." "Really?" Danny breathed. "Mama, did you hear that?" "I heard," Elena said quietly, but her expression had shifted from polite dismissal to something more complex. Hope warred with suspicion in her dark eyes. "That's very generous of your company, Mr. Blackwell." "It's not charity," Marcus said quickly, understanding her concern. "These kids earn their spots based on merit. Danny would have to apply like everyone else, complete an assessment, maybe write an essay about what he wants to learn." "I could write about books," Danny said eagerly. "Or about how Mama taught me to budget our grocery money using math. Or about the time we figured out how to fix our radiator by watching YouTube videos." Elena's face softened at her son's enthusiasm, but Marcus could see her internal struggle. Pride battling practicality, hope wrestling with years of disappointment. "Why?" she asked finally, meeting Marcus's eyes directly. "Why are you offering this?" Marcus could have given her corporate speak about community investment and developing future talent. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. Because 20 minutes ago, I watched your son read a book that most kids his age would struggle with, and then explain why perseverance matters more than easy success. Because I watched you treat people with kindness even when they didn't deserve it. Because you're raising him to be the kind of person the world needs more of, and that shouldn't be limited by circumstances beyond your control. Elena's composure wavered slightly. You don't know us. You're right. I don't. But I'd like to. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to examine. Danny looked between the adults, sensing the importance of the moment even if he didn't fully understand it. Does this mean I could learn computer programming? He asked hopefully. Mrs. Chennett's school says I'm good at logic puzzles. If you qualify for the program, yes, Marcus replied. And if your mother agrees. All eyes turned to Elena. Marcus could see her weighing options, calculating risks and benefits with the same precision she probably used to balance 3 jobs and single motherhood. But there was something else in her expression now, a flicker of the dreams she'd probably set aside years ago when life became about survival instead of possibility. What would the application process involve? She asked carefully. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate, not the adrenaline of closing a business deal, but something warmer and more uncertain. There's an assessment at the downtown office next Saturday morning. Basic skills evaluation, creative problem solving, an interview to understand what he's interested in learning. I work Saturdays, Elena said automatically, then caught herself. But I could probably switch shifts. Maybe. I could pick him up, Marcus offered, then immediately realized how that sounded. I mean, if you're comfortable with that. Or I could arrange transportation. Elena studied him for a long moment. Why would you do that? You don't even know if he'll qualify. Because I have a feeling about Danny, Marcus said honestly. And because. He hesitated, then decided to risk complete honesty. Because I haven't enjoyed an evening this much in years. You've both reminded me that there are more important things than quarterly reports and profit margins. Like what? Danny asked with genuine curiosity. Marcus looked at the boy, really looked at him. Danny's clothes were clean but clearly hand-me-downs, his shoes were scuffed but well-maintained, and his hair needed a trim. But his eyes were bright with intelligence and possibility, and his smile was completely unguarded despite everything life had already thrown at him. Like making sure smart, good kids get the chances they deserve. Like family dinners where people actually talk to each other instead of checking their phones. Like having someone worry about whether you're eating enough, or remember to ask about your day. Elena's breath caught slightly at that last part. Mr. Blackwell. Marcus, he corrected gently. And I'm not trying to complicate your life, Elena. I'm just asking for a chance to see where this goes. Dinner again, maybe. Getting to know each other better. Letting Danny explore opportunities that might change his future. And what if this is just novelty for you? Elena asked, her voice soft but serious. What happens when you get bored with playing benefactor? When your friends start asking uncomfortable questions about why you're spending time with people from my side of town? It was a fair question, and Marcus recognized the fear behind it. She'd probably been disappointed before, by Danny's father, by systems that promised help but delivered bureaucracy, by people who made promises they didn't keep. Then you'll be right to protect Danny from that, Marcus said simply. But I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to prove you wrong. Elena looked at her son, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the possibility of new opportunities, then back at Marcus. He could see the moment she made her decision, not to trust him completely, but to take the first small step. Saturday morning, she said quietly. But I'll drive him myself. And if this program is some kind of elaborate setup. It's not, Marcus assured her. But I respect your caution. Here's my card with my direct number. Call me if you have any questions, about the program, about anything. As Elena tucked the card into her purse and gathered their things to leave, Marcus realized something fundamental had shifted in his carefully ordered world. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to something that had nothing to do with business success or financial gain. He was looking forward to seeing them again. 6 months later, Marcus stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment, watching Seattle's evening skyline paint itself in shades of gold and crimson. The view was the same as always, Elliott Bay stretching toward distant mountains, the Space Needle piercing the sky like a steel promise, but everything else in his life had changed. "Marcus, come see what Danny made." Elena's voice carried from the kitchen, warm with pride and laughter. He turned from the window, still amazed by how naturally her presence had transformed his sterile penthouse into something that felt like home. Her touches were subtle but profound: books scattered on the coffee table, a vase of grocery store flowers on the dining room table, Danny's artwork magnet to the previously pristine refrigerator door. In the kitchen, Elena was pulling a pan of homemade lasagna from the oven while Danny sat at the island, bent over his laptop with intense concentration. The boy had not only qualified for the mentorship program but had thrived beyond everyone's expectations, showing an intuitive grasp of programming that had impressed even Marcus's most experienced developers. "Show him, sweetheart," Elena encouraged, setting the lasagna aside to cool. Danny looked up, his face beaming with excitement. "I finished the app. The one for the food bank. It tracks inventory and matches donations with families' dietary needs and allergies." Marcus leaned over to examine Danny's work, genuinely impressed by the sophisticated logic and user-friendly interface his 9-year-old. He caught himself before completing the thought, but it was getting harder to think of Danny as anything other than his son in all the ways that mattered. "This is incredible, Danny. The food bank director is going to love it." "And it's all because of the program you told us about," Danny said, his voice serious despite his youth. "Mama says I should always remember to thank people who help me reach higher." Elena met Marcus's eyes over Danny's head, and he saw the gratitude there, but more than that he saw love. Real, complicated, grown-up love that had developed slowly over shared dinners, weekend trips to the science museum, quiet conversations after Danny was asleep. The transition hadn't been seamless. Elena had maintained her fierce independence for months, insisting on paying her own way even as Marcus gradually helped her reduce her workload from 3 jobs to one well-paying position at his company's nonprofit foundation. She'd moved into the penthouse only last month, and only after Marcus had legally formalized his commitment to both of them in ways that went beyond romantic promises. "Dinner's ready," Elena announced, and they settled into the routine that had become Marcus's favorite part of every day. Danny chattered about school and his programming projects. Elena shared stories from her work with the foundation, and Marcus found himself talking about business challenges in ways he never had before, not just the financial implications, but the human impact of the decisions he made. "Oh!" Danny suddenly jumped up from the table. "I almost forgot. Mrs. Patterson wants to meet you both next week." "About the thing." Elena and Marcus exchanged amused glances. The thing was Danny's elaborately secretive plan for something special, though he'd been dropping hints for weeks about wanting to ask them both an important question. "What kind of meeting?" Elena asked, playing along with Danny's obvious excitement. "The official kind," Danny said importantly. "In her office, with papers and everything." After dinner, while Danny worked on homework in his room in Marcus's apartment, with a bed and desk and bookshelves that Marcus had insisted on buying because every child deserved a space of their own, Marcus and Elena cleaned up together, moving around each other with the easy familiarity of a couple who'd learned each other's rhythms. "He's planning something," Elena said, loading the dishwasher. "I have a suspicion about what," Marcus replied, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Mrs. Patterson is the school counselor who helps kids with special circumstances." Elena leaned back against him, fitting perfectly into his embrace. "Special circumstances?" "Like when they want to ask their mother's boyfriend if he'd consider becoming their official father." Elena turned in his arms, her eyes wide. "You think?" "I think Danny Rodriguez is about to ask me if I want to adopt him. Officially." Elena's eyes filled with tears, the happy kind that had taken Marcus months to learn to distinguish from the sad ones. What will you tell him? Marcus cupped her face in his hands, marveling at how this woman had changed everything he thought he knew about what mattered in life. I'll tell him I've been hoping he'd ask. I'll tell him that he's been my son in my heart since the night we met, and that making it legal would be the greatest honor of my life. And what about me? Elena asked softly. What will you tell me when I ask if you want to make this official too? Marcus's heart stopped, then resumed beating at double speed. Are you? I'm asking, Marcus Blackwell. I'm asking if you want to marry a former cleaning lady with a 9-year-old son and more dreams than practical sense. Elena Rodriguez, he said solemnly, I want to marry the strongest, smartest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. The one who taught me that love isn't a business transaction. It's a choice you make every day to build something better together than either of you could create alone. Their kiss was interrupted by Danny's voice from the hallway. Does this mean we're going to be a real family now? They broke apart to find him grinning in the doorway, and Marcus realized that they already were a real family, had been since that first night when a cancelled blind date had led to the best decision of his life. Yeah, buddy, Marcus said, pulling Danny into their embrace. We're going to be a real family. What does family mean to you? Is it about blood relations, or the people who choose to love and support each other? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your definition of what makes a real family. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most unexpected encounters. Marcus thought he was waiting for a perfectly planned blind date, but fate had something far more wonderful in store, a reminder that authentic love sees beyond social barriers and finds beauty in the most genuine hearts. What unexpected encounter changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear about hope found in unlikely places.